A wrong number usually ends with embarrassment. For Mara Hale, it ended with blood, sirens, and the sudden attention of the most dangerous man in New York. Hiding in a locked bedroom with a broken arm, fleeing from an assistant district attorney who had just shattered her bones like kindling, she tried to text her missing sister's emergency line. Her vision was blurred from shock. She mistyped one digit. That message didn't go to her sister. It went to the personal phone of Dominic Russo, the most ruthless mafia boss in New York City. A number that hadn't received a text since his wife died 3 years ago. What happens when a desperate woman accidentally summons a monster who's been waiting for a ghost to call? The answer is brutal, devastating, and irreversible. This is the story of She Texted He Broke My Arm to the Wrong Number. Ruthless Mafia boss replied, I'm on my way. If you're watching this video, give it a like, subscribe to the channel, and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. Now let's get to the story. The sound of a human arm breaking is distinct. It isn't a clean snap like a pencil. It's a deep, wet crack that echoes through bone and cartilage, a sound that seems to vibrate in the air long after it's over. Mara Hale heard that sound before she felt the pain. Then the agony arrived. White hot. Blinding. It exploded from her right wrist and radiated up her entire arm in waves so intense her vision flickered at the edges. She hit the hardwood floor hard, the impact knocking what little air remained from her lungs. Her fingers curled inward uselessly. Her wrist bent at an angle wrists were never designed to bend. Don't make me do this, Aaron said. His voice was calm. That was the worst part about Aaron Hale. He didn't yell. He didn't rage like the abusers in movies or the men you saw on crime shows. He was an assistant district attorney with the New York County DA's office. A man who understood exactly how to inflict maximum damage while maintaining plausible deniability. He knew where to hit. He knew how hard. He knew how to make it look like an accident if anyone ever asked. Usually, he was careful. Tonight, he'd lost control. Mara clutched her arm against her chest, unable to speak. Every heartbeat sent fresh pulses of pain through her body. She looked up at him through tears she refused to let fall. He was adjusting his tie, smoothing down the front of his tailored suit jacket, staring down at her with an expression of mild irritation, as if she were a stain on his reputation rather than the woman he'd promised to cherish 2 years ago. You embarrassed me, Aaron continued, his tone conversational. At the fundraiser. In front of the deputy mayor. You contradicted me, Mara. You made me look weak. He checked his watch. I have to go back to the office. There's a brief due in the morning. When I come home in 20 minutes, you're going to apologize. You're going to mean it. And we're going to move past this unfortunate incident. Do you understand? He grabbed his keys from the entryway table and walked out. The apartment door closed with a soft click. The deadbolt slid home with a sound that made Mara's entire body go rigid. She waited. She counted her own frantic heartbeats. 1 minute. 2 minutes. 3. When she was certain he was gone, she began to crawl. The pain was extraordinary. She knew medically what had happened. She'd taken anatomy courses in college before Aaron convinced her to drop out and focus on supporting his career. She knew the radius or ulna or both were fractured. She knew the swelling would get worse. She knew she needed a hospital. But she couldn't go to a hospital. Aaron had colleagues in every emergency room in Manhattan. They would call him. They always called him. He'd arrive with flowers and concern and apologies, and the doctors would believe him because he was Aaron Hale, rising star of the district attorney's office, and she was just the girlfriend who'd gotten clumsy after too much wine. She needed Lena. Her sister. The only person who'd never bought Aaron's performance. But Lena had disappeared 3 years ago, vanished while investigating a story about corruption in city government. All Mara had left was an emergency number Lena had made her memorize. Just in case. Mara dragged herself down the hallway toward the bedroom, the only room with a lock Aaron hadn't disabled yet. Every movement sent lightning bolts of agony up her arm. She made it inside, slammed the door, turned the lock, and collapsed against the bed frame, gasping. Her phone was on the nightstand. The screen was cracked from yesterday when Aaron had slapped it out of her hand during an argument about her tone. But it still worked. 11:47 at night. She opened her messages with trembling fingers. Her vision kept blurring. She had deleted Lena's contact months ago because Erin checked her phone every single night before bed. But she still remembered the number. 312-555-0198. Her thumb was slick with sweat. The screen was smeared with a drop of blood from her split lip. She tried to type carefully. 312-555. Her vision swam. 01. Her thumb slipped on the glass. She hit 19 instead of 98. She didn't notice. She just needed someone to know. Someone to help. Someone to care that she was dying in this beautiful apartment that had become her tomb. She typed with her left hand. Her broken right arm cradled uselessly against her body. He broke my arm. I can't move it. Please help. The phone slipped from her fingers and clattered onto the hardwood floor. Mara leaned her head back against the bed, tears finally spilling down her cheeks. The pain was becoming a heavy, dragging weight, pulling her down toward unconsciousness. She closed her eyes, praying Lena would see the message. Praying she was alive. Praying she'd come. Buzz. The phone vibrated against the floor. Mara jolted. Fresh agony ripped through her arm. She grabbed the phone, her hand shaking so badly she almost dropped it again. From unknown. Who is this? Mara frowned. Lena wouldn't ask that. Lena would recognize her number. Wouldn't she? Unless she'd changed phones. Unless she'd forgotten. Panic surged through Mara's chest, competing with the pain. To unknown. I'm sorry. Wrong number. I didn't mean. She stared at the screen, horrified. She'd texted a stranger. A stranger now had her address, her emergency, her desperation laid bare. She waited for the mockery, the confusion, the silence. Instead, 3 dots appeared. Then disappeared. Then appeared again. For 30 seconds that felt like hours there was nothing. Mara's vision tunneled. Her breathing was becoming shallow and rapid. She was going into shock. Then the phone buzzed. From unknown. Where are you? Mara's hands shook harder. This wasn't right. This wasn't how wrong numbers worked. You apologized. You moved on. You didn't ask follow-up questions. But something in those 2 words, in the directness of them, made her type again. To unknown. Please. I don't know who you are. But he broke my arm. I'm scared. The 3 dots appeared immediately this time. Then vanished. Then reappeared. The wait was excruciating. Mara clutched the phone like a lifeline, her broken arm throbbing in time with her pulse. Outside, she heard a car door slam. Terror spiked through her. Was Erin back already? Had it been 20 minutes? The phone buzzed. From unknown. I'm on my way. Mara stared at those 4 words until they blurred. Relief crashed through her. So powerful it was almost as painful as the injury. Someone was coming. A stranger, yes. Someone who might be dangerous, yes. But someone was coming, and that was more than she'd had 5 minutes ago. She waited. The bedroom door handle rattled. Erin's voice came through, controlled and cold. Mara, open the door. I'm not going to ask twice. She pressed herself harder against the bed frame, clutching the phone to her chest. 10 minutes passed. Then 15. Erin's footsteps retreated. She heard him in the living room, the clink of ice in a glass, the rustle of papers. He was waiting. He always waited. 20 minutes. 25. Mara's consciousness was starting to fracture at the edges. The pain was becoming distant, which she knew was a bad sign. Then she heard it. Not a knock. Not a doorbell. An explosion. The front door didn't open. It detonated inward, wood splintering with a crack that made Mara's scream catch in her throat. Heavy footsteps. Multiple sets. Shouts. Erin's voice, suddenly afraid, suddenly small. The crash of furniture. The unmistakable sound of fists connecting with flesh. Mara's bedroom door handle turned. She held her breath. The door swung open. A man filled the doorway, and the room seemed to darken around him. Tall. broad-shouldered, wearing a black coat soaked with rain she hadn't realized was falling. His face was shadow and sharp angles, his eyes dark and unreadable. He looked at her broken arm. His jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "Arm," he said. His voice was low, controlled, a blade wrapped in velvet. "Show me." Mara extended her injured arm with a whimper. The man knelt in front of her, movements precise and economical. He didn't touch her. He just looked. Then he stood. Behind him, Aaron screamed. It was a sound Mara had never heard him make. The sound of a predator realizing he'd become prey. "No," Mara whispered. "Please don't." The man paused. He glanced back at her, and for the first time she saw something flicker in his expression. Not sympathy. Something colder. Something final. "Too late," he said. The man turned and walked out of the bedroom. Mara heard his footsteps cross the hardwood floor with terrifying purpose. She tried to push herself up to see what was happening, but her body wouldn't cooperate. The pain and shock had her pinned like a specimen under glass. Aaron's voice rose in pitch. "Do you know who I am? I'm an assistant district attorney. You're making a massive mistake. I have friends in..." The sound that cut him off wasn't a gunshot. It was worse. It was the wet, heavy thud of a fist connecting with bone, followed by a gasp that ended in a choking gurgle. Then another impact. And another. Methodical. Precise. The same cold efficiency Aaron had always used on her, now turned back on him with professional brutality. Mara heard Aaron's body hit the wall. Heard him whimper. That sound, that pathetic mewling from a man who'd spent 2 years convincing her she was worthless, should have brought her satisfaction. Instead, it terrified her. Because whatever was happening in her living room wasn't justice. It was something far darker. "You broke her arm," a voice said. Not the man who'd found her. Someone else. Younger. Angrier. "You piece of..." "Enough." The first man's voice cut through like a blade. "He's conscious. That's all that matters. Get him in the car. Make sure the neighbors see him alive." Footsteps. Dragging sounds. Aaron's protests reduced to incoherent sobbing. The apartment door opened and closed. Then silence. Mara's breathing was the only sound in the world until the bedroom doorway filled again. The man stood there, backlit by the living room light, rain still dripping from his coat. He was older than she'd first thought. Mid-40s, maybe. His face was all hard angles and controlled violence, the kind of face that made grown men cross the street. But his eyes, when they met hers, were empty. Not cruel. Just void. "Can you stand?" he asked. Mara shook her head. Her legs had turned to water. He moved forward without hesitation, shrugging out of his coat. It was expensive. She could tell even through her haze. Cashmere or something close. He draped it around her shoulders. It smelled like smoke and rain and something else. Something expensive and masculine that made her head spin. "I'm going to carry you," he said. Not asking. Informing. "Your arm. I'll be careful." Before she could respond, he slid one arm under her knees and the other behind her back, lifting her like she weighed nothing. Mara gasped as the movement jostled her injury, fresh agony radiating up her arm. He adjusted his grip immediately, shifting her weight so her broken arm rested against his chest, supported but not compressed. "Breathe through it," he said, his voice low and steady. "We're almost out." He carried her through the apartment. Mara caught glimpses as they moved. The overturned coffee table. The shattered glass. The dark stain on the cream-colored wall that might have been blood. Aaron's blood. The realization should have meant something, but her mind was fragmenting, unable to process anything beyond the pain and the stranger's steady heartbeat beneath her ear. The hallway outside was full of people. Neighbors in bathrobes and pajamas, drawn by the noise, clustered near their doors with phones in hand. They saw her. Saw the man carrying her. Saw the broken door behind them. Not one of them said a word. Not one of them called out or asked if she needed help. They just watched. Silent. Afraid. And Mara understood with sudden, crystalline clarity that whoever this man was, His reputation preceded him by miles. The stairwell was brutal. Each step sent tremors through her body despite his careful movements. By the time they reached the ground floor, Mara's vision was graying at the edges. She heard him speaking to someone, low and clipped, words she couldn't quite catch. Then cold air hit her face. Rain. They were outside. A car waited at the curb. Black. Expensive. 3 more just like it lined the street, engines running, headlights cutting through the downpour. Men in dark suits stood sentinel, their faces hard and watchful. One of them opened the rear door of the closest car. The man carried her inside, settling her on the leather seat with surprising gentleness before sliding in beside her. The door closed. The world went quiet. Just the rain on the roof and the low hum of the engine. Through the tinted windows, Mara saw another car pulling away. Aaron's face visible for just a moment in the back seat. His nose was bleeding. His left eye was already swelling shut. He looked small. Broken. He looked the way she'd felt for 2 years. The car began to move. Mara leaned back against the seat, cradling her arm, her entire body shaking. The man sat beside her, silent and still, his presence filling the space like a physical weight. Minutes passed. The city lights blurred past. Finally, Mara found her voice. "Who are you?" she whispered. He didn't answer immediately, just watched the rain streak across the window. When he finally spoke, his voice was quiet, controlled, dangerous. Dominic Russo. The name hit her like ice water. Mara's breath caught. Everyone in New York knew that name. You heard it in whispers in certain neighborhoods. You read it between the lines in newspaper articles about organized crime that never quite named their sources. Dominic Russo. The ghost of Manhattan. The man who controlled half the city from the shadows while the other half pretended he didn't exist. You texted my wife's phone, Dominic continued, still not looking at her. A burner line I gave her 6 years ago. For emergencies only. It hasn't rung since the day she died. Mara's mind raced through possibilities, through explanations, through the impossible coincidence that had put a dead woman's number in her memory as her sister's emergency line. I don't understand. My sister Lena, she gave me that number 3 years ago. She said. Lena Hale. Dominic's jaw tightened. Journalist. Investigating corruption in the DA's office. She disappeared in 2023. The world tilted. You knew her. My wife knew her. They were working together. Dominic finally turned to face her, and the emptiness in his eyes made Mara's chest constrict. Elena Russo. Investigative journalist. She was killed covering the same story your sister was chasing. The story that implicated men like Aaron Hale in evidence tampering, bribery, and obstruction of justice. Mara's broken arm throbbed in time with her racing pulse. Aaron never mentioned. He wouldn't. He helped bury it. Dominic's voice was flat. Factual. My wife died in a car accident that wasn't an accident. Your sister vanished 2 weeks later. The investigation died with them. I couldn't prove who gave the order. Not then. The implications crashed over Mara like a wave. Aaron hadn't just abused her. He'd destroyed evidence, helped cover up murder, and she'd been sleeping beside him, eating dinner with him, letting him slowly erase her piece by piece while he carried those secrets. Why did you come? Mara asked. If you knew the number was dead. If you knew. Because for 3 years I've waited for that phone to ring. Dominic's voice was barely above a whisper. I've kept it charged. Kept it close. On the chance that somehow, impossibly, it would be her. That I was wrong about what happened. That she'd come back. He looked down at his hands. They were bruised across the knuckles. Aaron's blood stained his cuff. It wasn't her, he said. But someone needed help. Someone connected to the same people who killed my wife. That was enough. Mara didn't know what to say. The car turned, the movement gentle but deliberate. They were heading uptown. Away from her apartment. Away from everything she knew. Where are we going? She asked. Dominic pulled out his phone, typed something, then spoke to the driver without looking up. "Take us to the Hudson." The driver nodded. The car changed direction. Mara felt her stomach drop. The Hudson meant the waterfront, the warehouses, the places where bodies were found floating when they were found at all. She must have made a sound because Dominic glanced at her, and something almost like amusement flickered across his face. "There's a private medical facility," he said. "A doctor who specializes in injuries that can't go through official channels. Your arm needs to be set properly. Tonight." Relief and terror ward in Mara's chest. "And Aaron Hale is being taken somewhere he can think about his choices." Dominic's voice went cold. "He'll live. For now. Whether he stays that way depends on what we find when we dig into his files." The "we" in that sentence hung in the air like a threat and a promise. Mara realized with sudden, dizzying clarity that her life had just been rewritten. The wrong number hadn't just saved her. It had dragged her into a world she'd only read about. A world of blood and secrets and men who solved problems with violence instead of law. A world where Dominic Russo was king. "I can't pay you," Mara said quietly. "For the doctor. For any of this. I don't have. You texted my dead wife's phone in the middle of the night with a broken arm and a desperate plea." Dominic's eyes met hers, and for the first time she saw something other than emptiness there. Something that might have been recognition. Or maybe just resignation. "You don't owe me anything. Fate does." The car slid through the rain-soaked streets, carrying Mara away from the woman she'd been and toward something she couldn't yet name. Behind them, her apartment building grew smaller in the distance. Ahead, the city lights reflected off the dark water of the Hudson. And beside her, the most dangerous man in New York sat in silence, still waiting for a ghost to call. The medical facility wasn't what Mara expected. No sterile hospital walls or fluorescent lights. Instead, the car pulled into an underground garage beneath a waterfront building that looked abandoned from the outside. They took a private elevator to the 4th floor, where floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the Hudson River. The space was more penthouse than clinic, all dark wood and leather furniture. But the examination room they entered was equipped with technology that rivaled any emergency department. The doctor was a woman in her 60s with silver hair pulled back in a neat bun and hands that moved with the confidence of decades of experience. She didn't ask questions, didn't request insurance information or identification. She simply looked at Mara's arm, then at Dominic. "Displaced fracture of the radius," she said. "Clean break, but it needs reduction and casting immediately. The swelling is significant. Do it," Dominic said from his position against the wall. He hadn't left her side since they'd arrived. Hadn't touched her, hadn't hovered, but his presence was constant. A shadow she couldn't escape. The doctor prepared a nerve block. "This will hurt less than general anesthesia, and you'll be alert throughout. I need you to stay very still." Mara nodded, her throat too tight for words. The injection burned. Then gradually her arm went numb from the elbow down. The absence of pain was almost worse than the pain itself. At least agony was familiar. This strange floating sensation while the doctor manipulated her broken bones back into alignment made her feel disconnected from her own body. She watched the procedure in the reflection of the darkened window. Watched Dominic watch her. His face revealed nothing, but his knuckles were white where his hands gripped his arms across his chest. The entire process took 40 minutes. When it was done, her arm was encased in a dark blue fiberglass cast from knuckles to elbow. "No weight bearing for 6 weeks minimum," the doctor said, handing Mara a bottle of pills. "Pain management. Take them. Bone pain is nothing to endure unnecessarily." She glanced at Dominic. She needs rest. Actual rest. No stress. Something that might have been dark amusement crossed Dominic's face. Understood. The doctor left. Mara sat on the examination table, cradling her newly casted arm, suddenly aware that she was alone with a man whose reputation was built on violence. A man who'd destroyed her apartment door and brutalized Aaron without hesitation. A man who'd carried her out like she was something precious and brought her to a secret medical facility that probably treated gunshot wounds more often than domestic abuse injuries. "Can I go home?" she asked quietly. "No," The finality of that single word made her stomach clench. Why not? Dominic moved to the window, hands in his pockets, silhouette dark against the city lights. Because Aaron Hale is currently in a holding facility spinning a very convincing story about how his girlfriend attacked him during a psychotic episode. How he defended himself. How he was the real victim. He turned to face her. By now, he's contacted every colleague, every friend, every person with power he's cultivated over the past decade. He's building a narrative. And in that narrative, you're dangerous. Mara's breath caught. No one will believe that. Everyone will believe it. He's a prosecutor. You're no one. Dominic's voice was clinical. Factual. Brutal in its honesty. He has evidence of erratic behavior. Deleted contacts on your phone. Isolation from friends and family. A pattern he created deliberately to use exactly this way if you ever tried to leave. The truth of it crushed down on Mara's chest. Aaron had been building this escape route for months. Maybe years. Every time he'd made her cancel plans with friends. Every time he'd convinced her to quit another job. Every time he'd checked her phone and made her delete numbers. He'd been constructing a cage so perfect that even when she broke free, she'd still be trapped inside his story. So what happens to me? Mara asked. You stay here. Under my protection. Until we dismantle his credibility completely. Here. Mara looked around the medical suite. In this building? I own several properties. You'll be moved to a secure location tomorrow. Somewhere Aaron's connections can't reach. Dominic crossed his arms. You'll have everything you need. Privacy. Security. Medical care. Everything except freedom. Freedom is relative. Dominic's eyes were flat. You had freedom in that apartment. How did that work out? The words stung because they were true. Mara had been free to come and go. Free to make choices. And every single choice had been shaped by fear of what Aaron would do if she chose wrong. This was just a different cage. More comfortable. More honest about what it was. Why are you doing this? Mara asked. You said you came because of your wife's phone. But you could have just called the police. Let them handle it. For a long moment, Dominic didn't answer. He turned back to the window, and when he spoke, his voice was quieter. More human than she'd heard it. My wife was Elena Russo. Before she married me, she was Elena Volkov. Investigative journalist. She had this theory that the district attorney's office was compromised. That certain prosecutors were burying cases, manipulating evidence, protecting organized crime in exchange for political favors and cash. He paused. She was right. And it got her killed. Mara's pulse quickened. Aaron was part of it. Aaron was young then. Ambitious. Perfect target for recruitment. Elena had documentation. Recordings. She gave copies to your sister, Lena. They were going to publish together. Break the whole thing open. Dominic's reflection in the glass was stone. Elena died in a car accident 3 days before the story was supposed to run. Brake line failure. Convenient. Your sister disappeared 2 weeks later. The evidence vanished with them. And you couldn't prove it. I'm a criminal, Miss Hale. My word means nothing to the law. Without Elena's evidence, I had nothing but suspicion and rage. He turned to face her fully. For 3 years I've been waiting. Watching. Building cases through other channels. Legal channels. Trying to do this the right way because that's what Elena would have wanted. And then I texted her phone. And then fate handed me a witness. Someone who'd been inside Aaron Hale's life. Someone who could testify to his character, his violence, his capacity for deception. Dominic's gaze was intense. You're not just a victim I saved, Mara. You're a weapon I can use. The honesty was startling. Most people would have dressed it up, called it protection or justice or something noble. Dominic just laid it bare. She was useful to him. That's why she was here. Am I safe or owned? Mara asked, her voice steady despite the fear curling in her gut. Dominic considered the question seriously. Both. I won't hurt you. I won't let anyone else hurt you. But you can't leave. Not yet. Not until Aaron and everyone connected to him is neutralized. Protection has a cost, and the cost is your compliance. And if I refuse, then you walk out that door right now, and I wish you luck surviving the next 48 hours. His expression didn't change. Aaron's allies are powerful. They'll destroy you to protect themselves. They'll make you disappear the same way they made your sister disappear. I'm offering you a chance to fight back. But only if you stay. It wasn't a choice. Not really. But at least he wasn't pretending it was anything other than what it was. A transaction. Safety in exchange for cooperation. Mara looked down at her casted arm. Thought about Aaron's face when Dominic's men had dragged him away. Thought about Lena, missing for 3 years. Probably dead because she tried to expose the truth. I'll stay, Mara said quietly. But I want to know everything. About Elena. About Lena. About what you're planning. Something shifted in Dominic's expression. Not quite respect, but acknowledgement. Agreed. He pulled out his phone, typed something, then showed her the screen. It was a news alert from 30 minutes ago. Assistant District Attorney Aaron Hale arrested on charges of financial fraud and evidence tampering. The article was sparse on details but mentioned an anonymous tip and recovered documentation. How? Mara breathed. I've had people inside the DA's office for 2 years. Waiting for the right moment to move. Dominic pocketed the phone. Your text tonight gave me probable cause to investigate him personally. What we found in his apartment files was enough to start criminal proceedings. The financial crimes are just the beginning. Mara felt something cold settle in her chest. This wasn't spontaneous. This was orchestrated. Dominic had been planning this for years, and she'd stumbled into the middle of his war without knowing it. You would have come for him anyway, she realized. With or without me. Eventually. But you accelerated the timeline. Dominic moved toward the door. There's a bedroom through there. Clothes in your size. Toiletries. Rest. We'll talk more tomorrow. He was halfway through the door when Mara spoke again. Thank you. For coming. Even if I was just a convenient excuse. Dominic paused. Didn't turn around. You weren't an excuse. You were a sign. Elena always said the universe has a sense of timing. Then he was gone, the door closing softly behind him. Mara sat alone in the medical suite, her broken arm aching despite the medication, her mind racing through everything she'd learned. She'd escaped one prison only to enter another. But this cage had windows. And the man who'd locked her inside had just given her the key to destroying the man who'd broken her. Maybe that was enough. For now. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. She'd forgotten she still had it. The screen showed a news notification. Another article about Aaron's arrest. This one mentioned his cooperation with federal investigators. Her blood went cold. The door opened. Dominic stood there, phone in his hand, his expression darker than she'd seen it. Aaron's talking, he said flatly. He's giving the feds everything. Names. Dates. Connections. His jaw tightened. Including mine. The war, Mara realized, had just begun. The safe house Dominic moved her to wasn't a house at all. It was an estate. 20 acres in Westchester County, surrounded by walls that looked decorative but were reinforced with steel. Guards at every entrance. Cameras hidden in the landscaping. Security so sophisticated it made the president's detail look casual. Mara spent the first 3 days in a guest suite that was larger than her entire apartment had been. She watched news coverage of Aaron's cooperation with federal investigators. Watched his lawyer make statements about his client's courage in exposing corruption. Watched Aaron transform himself from abuser to whistleblower in real time. It was masterful. Sickening. And it was working. By day 4, the arrests started. Low-level enforcers first. Then lieutenants. Men connected to Dominic's organization but far enough removed that he had plausible deniability. The feds were building a case brick by brick, using Aaron's testimony as the foundation. Dominic barely slept. Mara saw him at odd hours, always on the phone, always moving, orchestrating countermeasures she didn't fully understand. He'd assigned her a guard, a silent man named Marcus who stood outside her door and pretended she didn't exist. She had everything she needed except purpose. On day 6, she stopped pretending to rest. She found Dominic in what the estate staff called the library, though it looked more like a war room. Maps covered one wall. Photographs of faces she didn't recognize. Red string connecting names and locations like something from a conspiracy theorist's basement. Dominic stood in the center of it, tie loosened, sleeves rolled up, studying a tablet with the intensity of a general planning an invasion. "You should be sleeping," he said without looking up. "So should you." Mara moved closer, studying the wall. "What am I looking at?" "The fallout." Dominic set down the tablet. "Aaron's testimony is strategic. He's naming people who can't immediately retaliate. Building credibility with small fish before he goes after the sharks." "You're a shark." "I'm the shark. He's saving me for last. Giving the feds time to build an airtight case." Dominic's jaw tightened. "And giving my enemies time to make their move." Mara looked at the photographs. Hard faces. Cold eyes. Men who looked like they'd been carved from stone and violence. "Your enemies think you're weakened." "I am weakened. 3 of my warehouses have been hit in the past 48 hours. Supply chains disrupted. Revenue streams cut. Aaron knew exactly what to leak to cause maximum damage." Dominic picked up a remote and clicked. The television mounted above the fireplace lit up with security footage. This was last night. Red Hook. The footage showed a warehouse exploding in a fireball. Silent figures fleeing into the darkness. Mara counted at least a dozen attackers. Professional. Coordinated. Not random violence but calculated warfare. "Who?" she asked. "The Volkov family. My late wife's relatives. They've been waiting for an opening like this for 3 years." Dominic's voice was flat. "Elena's father never forgave me for getting his daughter killed. He thinks I was careless. He's probably right." Mara heard the weight in those words. The guilt Dominic carried like a second skeleton beneath his skin. She understood it. She'd spent 2 years blaming herself for Aaron's violence, for not leaving sooner, for not being smarter or stronger or better. "Show me," she said. Dominic looked at her. "Show you what?" "Everything. The patterns. The vulnerabilities. I spent 2 years watching Aaron manipulate systems and people. I know how to spot weaknesses." Mara met his gaze. "You said I was a weapon. Let me be useful." For a long moment, Dominic studied her. Then he nodded once. "Follow me." He spent the next 6 hours teaching her his world. Showed her organizational charts. Explained territories and alliances. Revealed the intricate web of businesses, both legal and illegal, that funded his empire. Mara absorbed it all, her mind cataloging details the way she used to memorize medical terminology. She noticed things. Gaps in security rotations. Predictable patterns in shipment schedules. Weaknesses Aaron would have identified immediately because Dominic's organization, for all its power, operated with the kind of routine that could be exploited. "You're too consistent," she said, pointing to a map of delivery routes. "Here. And here. Same trucks, same times, same drivers every week. Anyone watching could set an ambush." Dominic's expression shifted. "We've been using those routes for 5 years. Which means they're overdue for an attack." Mara traced the path with her finger. "If I were planning to destabilize you, I'd hit these simultaneously. Force you to choose which to defend." Dominic pulled out his phone and made 3 calls in rapid succession. By the time he finished, the routes were being changed. Mara felt something stir in her chest. Not pride exactly, but purpose. For the first time in 2 years, her thoughts mattered. Her observations had value. They worked through the night. Mara identified 7 potential vulnerabilities. Dominic addressed them all. By dawn, she was exhausted and her broken arm ached despite the medication, but she felt more alive than she had in months. "You should have been running your own organization," Dominic said as morning light filtered through the windows. "I was too busy being someone's punching bag." The bitterness in Mara's voice surprised them both. Dominic was quiet for a moment. "You're not that person anymore." Before Mara could respond, every light in the estate went out. Darkness swallowed them whole. Emergency lighting should have activated immediately. It didn't. Dominic moved before Mara could process what was happening, his hand closing around her good arm, pulling her down behind the massive desk. "Stay low," he whispered. Then the shooting started. The sound of automatic gunfire tore through the silence. Windows shattered. Wood splintered. Mara pressed herself against the floor, her heart hammering so hard she thought her ribs might crack. Dominic had a gun in his hand, pulled from somewhere she hadn't seen. He was on his phone, voice low and controlled. "East Wing compromised. Multiple shooters. Cut the main power." A pause. "Do it now." More gunfire. Closer this time. Mara heard shouting. Return fire from Dominic's guards. The distinctive crack of different caliber weapons. This wasn't a raid. It was an execution attempt. Dominic looked at her in the dim emergency lighting that finally flickered to life. "Can you move?" "Yes." He pressed something into her good hand. Cold metal. Heavy. A gun. Mara stared at it. "Safety's off," Dominic said. "Point and squeeze if anyone comes through that door who isn't me or Marcus. Understand?" Mara nodded, her throat too tight for words. "Stay behind the desk. Don't move until I come back." He started to rise. Mara grabbed his sleeve. "No. Mara. I'm not hiding." She met his eyes. "I know this house. I've walked every hallway for 6 days with nothing to do but memorize the layout. There's a service corridor that runs behind this room. Leads to the kitchen, the garage, anywhere we need to go. They won't know about it." Dominic stared at her. "How do you?" "Because I was looking for escape routes. Old habits." Mara pushed herself up, cradling her casted arm. "I can get us out. But we have to move now." Another explosion rocked the building. Dominic made a decision. "Show me." Mara led him to the bookshelf on the east wall. She'd discovered the hidden door on day 2 while exploring. It opened with a push on a specific spine, revealing a narrow corridor built for servants in an era when help was meant to be invisible. The passage was dark and close, but it ran the length of the house. They moved in silence. Behind them, gunfire intensified. Ahead, Mara counted doors in the darkness, remembering the layout. 3rd door led to the kitchen. 5th to the garage. She chose the garage. Better chance of vehicles of escape. They were halfway there when Dominic stopped. His hand shot out, stopping her. Someone's ahead. Mara heard it then. Footsteps. Voices speaking Russian. The Volkov family. They'd infiltrated deeper than anyone realized. Dominic raised his weapon, but the corridor was too narrow. Any shot would be point-blank and loud enough to draw every attacker in the building. Mara touched his arm, pointed to a side panel she'd noticed during her explorations. A ventilation shaft large enough for a person. Barely. Dominic shook his head. Too tight for him. But not for her. She went first, crawling through the shaft one-armed, the gun clutched awkwardly in her good hand. Behind her, Dominic moved through the corridor, drawing fire, creating a distraction. Mara heard shouting. More gunfire. Then a sound that made her blood freeze. Dominic's sharp intake of breath. The wet thud of a body hitting a wall. Silence. Mara dropped from the shaft into the garage, her broken arm screaming as she landed badly. She ignored the pain, moving toward the corridor access door. Dominic stumbled through, one hand pressed to his side. Dark blood seeped between his fingers. "You're shot," Mara breathed. "Grazed." But the amount of blood said otherwise. Dominic's face was pale, his jaw tight with pain. "We need to move." He made it 3 steps before his knees buckled. Mara caught him barely, her small frame supporting his weight against the nearest car. A black SUV with keys in the ignition. Of course. Dominic's paranoia meant every vehicle was ready to run. I need to call the doctor, Mara said, pulling out Dominic's phone from his pocket. Her hands were shaking. She dialed the number she'd memorized from the medical suite. The doctor's voice was clipped. This isn't a secure line. He's been shot. We need you. I can't. Federal agents are watching my building. I'm sorry. The line went dead. Mara stared at the phone. At Dominic, bleeding heavily, his breathing shallow. At her own broken arm. At the gun in her hand. Behind them, the estate was a war zone. Ahead, the garage door was closed, probably locked down by security protocols. She'd spent 2 years being helpless. Being the victim. Being the woman who couldn't save herself. That woman was dead. She'd died the night she sent a text to a wrong number. The woman who remained had survived this long by being smarter than the people trying to destroy her. Mara got behind the wheel. Put the gun on the passenger seat. Looked at Dominic, barely conscious. Blood spreading across his expensive shirt. Hold on, she said. Then she drove the SUV straight through the garage door. The SUV's airbag deployed on impact, slamming into Mara's chest and casted arm with enough force to steal her breath. She shoved it aside, her ribs screaming, and looked at Dominic slumped in the passenger seat. Still breathing. Still bleeding. She drove. No destination in mind except away. The estate's perimeter was chaos behind them. Gunfire, sirens, the distinctive whump of something else exploding. Mara's hands were white-knuckled on the wheel. Her broken arm braced against her body, useless and throbbing. She took random turns, doubled back twice, checked the mirrors obsessively the way Aaron had taught her to watch for his mood shifts. Different skill. Same survival instinct. 10 minutes out, she found what she was looking for. A long-term parking garage near the train station. Anonymous. Poorly lit. The kind of place people left cars for weeks without anyone noticing. She pulled into the lowest level, cut the engine, and finally let herself look at Dominic. He was conscious. Barely. His hand still pressed against the wound in his side, but the blood had soaked through his shirt and was pooling on the leather seat. His face was gray beneath the olive complexion, lips compressed against pain. Doctor, he managed. Unavailable. We're on our own. Mara's voice was steadier than she felt. She'd never done this before. Never treated a gunshot wound. But she'd spent 6 months in pre-med before Aaron convinced her to drop out. Convinced her she wasn't smart enough. That she'd fail. That trying would only embarrass them both. She'd believed him. God help her, she'd believed everything he said. Not anymore. Mara pulled Dominic's jacket off, then his shirt. The wound was high on his left side, below the ribs. Through and through, she thought. Entry and exit. That was good. No bullet to dig out. But the bleeding was heavy and the exit wound was larger, more ragged. She needed supplies. Mara searched the SUV and found an emergency kit in the back. Of course, Dominic kept one. Gauze, medical tape, antiseptic, even a suture kit. She worked by the garage's dim overhead lights, her hands steadier than they had any right to be. This is going to hurt, she warned. Dominic's laugh was weak. Add it to the list. Mara poured antiseptic over both wounds. Dominic's body went rigid, but he didn't make a sound. She packed the wounds with gauze, hands moving with a confidence she didn't know she possessed. Muscle memory from anatomy classes she'd thought she'd forgotten. Knowledge Aaron had convinced her to abandon. You would have been a good doctor, Dominic said, his voice strained. I was going to be. Mara's hands didn't stop moving. Before Aaron explained all the reasons I couldn't. Wouldn't. Shouldn't even try. She wrapped pressure bandages around Dominic's torso, pulling them tight. He hissed through his teeth but didn't protest. When she finished, she sat back, her own arm screaming. The adrenaline was fading, leaving exhaustion and pain in its wake. Tell me about her, Mara said quietly. Elena. Dominic's eyes were closed. For a moment she thought he'd passed out. Then he spoke. She was everything I wasn't. Honest. Idealistic. She believed truth mattered more than power. He exhaled carefully. She was wrong. Truth without power is just noise. But I loved her anyway. How did you meet? She was investigating me. Organized crime connection to city contracts. She showed up at one of my legitimate businesses with a list of questions and absolutely no fear. A ghost of a smile touched his mouth. Most people are afraid of me. She was annoyed I was wasting her time with denials. Mara understood that. The attraction to someone who didn't bend. Didn't break. She'd thought Aaron was strong like that once. Realized too late that rigidity wasn't strength. It was fragility pretending to be steel. When your text came through, Dominic said. When I saw Elena's number on my phone after 3 years. I thought I was hallucinating. Thought maybe I'd finally lost my mind to grief. He opened his eyes, looking at her. I came because I thought she was calling for help. That somehow, impossibly, she was alive and needed me. The confession hung in the air between them. Mara saw it clearly now. The desperation in the way he'd broken down her door. The fury when he'd seen Aaron. This hadn't been about justice or strategy or building a case. It had been about a man who'd failed to save the woman he loved. Given one impossible chance at redemption. I'm sorry I'm not her, Mara said. Don't be. Dominic's gaze was intense despite the pain. You saved yourself. Elena never got that chance. I never gave her the chance. I thought protection meant keeping her away from my world. Turns out it just meant she faced her enemies alone. Mara thought about her apartment. The locks Aaron had installed. The phone he monitored. The carefully constructed isolation he'd called love. Protection was just another word for control. Unless it came with freedom. With choice. Dominic's phone buzzed. Mara pulled it from his pocket, read the notification, and felt her blood go cold. Aaron escaped, she said. What? During prisoner transfer. Armed assault on the transport vehicle. 3 federal agents wounded. Aaron Hale escaped custody and is considered armed and dangerous. Mara looked at Dominic. Someone broke him out. Dominic tried to sit up, winced, gave up. The Volkovs. They need him alive to testify. Without his cooperation, the federal case collapses. He reached for the phone. We need to move. Get somewhere secure. Where? Your estate is compromised. The doctor won't see you. Half your organization is under federal investigation and the other half is fighting a war. Mara's voice was calm. Factual. We're on our own. Then we run. I have resources. Overseas accounts. New identities. Dominic met her eyes. I can get you out. Tonight. A new name, a new life. Somewhere Aaron and the Volkovs and everyone else will never find you. You've earned it. The offer was genuine. Mara heard it in his voice. Dominic Russo, crime lord, monster to some, broken-hearted widower to others, was offering her exactly what she'd wanted 6 days ago. Freedom. Escape. A chance to disappear and never look back. She thought about that woman. The one who'd texted a dead woman's phone in desperation. Who'd hidden in bathrooms and lied about her injuries and apologized for being hurt. Who'd believed she deserved the fists and the cruelty because she wasn't good enough, smart enough, strong enough to be loved without violence. That woman would have taken the offer. Would have run so far and so fast she'd never stop looking over her shoulder. No, Mara said. Dominic blinked. No. I'm not running. Not from Aaron, not from the Volkovs, not from any of this. Mara stood, her broken arm cradled against her chest. Dried blood on her hands from Dominic's wounds. You said I was a weapon. You were right. But I'm not your weapon. I'm mine. Mara. Aaron took 3 years of my life. He broke my arm and my spirit and convinced me I was nothing without him. Her voice didn't shake. He killed my sister. He helped kill your wife. He's working with people who would rather burn this city down than face consequences. And you want me to hide? Dominic was silent. I'm done hiding, Mara said. I'm done being the victim in someone else's story. If there's a war, I'm fighting it. If Aaron wants to come for me, let him come. This time I won't be alone in an apartment with no one to hear me scream. Something shifted in Dominic's expression. Respect, maybe. Or recognition. Two people who'd failed to save the ones they loved, given a second chance to save each other. You understand what you're choosing, Dominic said. This doesn't end clean. People will die. Maybe us. I've been dying for 2 years. At least this way I'll be alive when it happens. Dominic's phone buzzed again. Mara looked at the screen and her heart stuttered. A message from an unknown number. An address. And a single line of text. Come alone if you want to end this. Bring the girl. It's a trap, Dominic said. Mara pulled up the address on the phone's map. An abandoned courthouse in Lower Manhattan. Scheduled for demolition. The kind of place where bodies could disappear and no one would find them for months. Of course it's a trap. Mara looked at Dominic. Aaron's never fought fair in his life. Why would he start now? We don't have backup. I'm injured. You have a broken arm. Dominic's voice was strained. We can't win this. We don't have to win. We just have to survive long enough to burn everything down around him. Mara helped Dominic to his feet. He was unsteady, leaning heavily on her, but he could stand. That was enough. You taught me to look for patterns. Weaknesses. Aaron's weakness is his ego. He needs to win. Needs to be the smartest person in the room. Needs everyone to watch him destroy his enemies. So we give him an audience. We give him exactly what he wants. And while he's gloating, we end him. Mara met Dominic's eyes. Together. Dominic studied her for a long moment. Then nodded once. Together. They got back in the SUV. Mara behind the wheel again. Dominic beside her, wounded but alive. His phone in his hand making calls to whoever he had left. Outside, the city moved on, unaware that in a parking garage 2 broken people had just chosen war over peace, violence over safety, and revenge over redemption. Mara pulled out of the garage and pointed the SUV toward Lower Manhattan. Toward Aaron. Toward an ending that had been 3 years in the making. She didn't run. She drove straight into the fire. The courthouse rose from the Manhattan streets like a rotting tooth. Marble columns blackened by decades of exhaust. Windows boarded over. Demolition notices plastered across the entrance. The city had condemned it 5 years ago, but bureaucracy moved slower than decay. Now it was just a shell waiting to be erased. Perfect place for an ending. Mara parked 2 blocks away. Dominic's bleeding had slowed but not stopped. His face still too pale, his movements careful. He'd made 6 calls during the drive. She didn't know who he'd contacted or what he'd arranged. Didn't ask. Some things were better left unknown. Last chance, Dominic said. I can still get you out. Stop asking me to run. Mara checked the gun he'd given her. Safety off. Full magazine. She had no idea if she could actually shoot someone. Hoped she wouldn't have to find out. What's the plan? Survive. Anything beyond that is improvisation. Dominic pulled himself out of the SUV. One hand pressed to his wounded side. Aaron wants an audience. Wants to prove he's still in control. Let him perform. People make mistakes when they think they're winning. They approached the courthouse from the east entrance, a service door half hidden behind overgrown ivy. It opened with a push. No lock. No security. Aaron wanted them inside. Wanted this confrontation. The question was why. The interior was worse than the exterior. Marble floors cracked and stained. Plaster falling from ceilings in diseased chunks. Courtrooms stripped of furniture. Just empty boxes echoing with abandonment. Mara's footsteps were too loud in the silence. Beside her, Dominic moved quietly despite his injury. Predator instincts overriding pain. They found Aaron in the main courtroom on the 3rd floor. He stood at the judge's bench, wearing an expensive suit despite being a fugitive. His hair perfect, his smile familiar. That smile had charmed her once. Made her believe she was special. Now it just looked like what it was. A weapon designed to disarm. Mara. Erin's voice was warm. Welcoming. Like she'd come home after a long trip. I was worried you wouldn't come. You gave me an address and threatened me. What did you expect? Mara kept her distance, gun at her side but ready. Dominic stayed behind her, silent, watching. Threatened? Is that what you think? Erin shook his head, genuinely amused. Mara, sweetheart, I was offering you a way out. A chance to end this insanity before more people get hurt. There it was. The shift. The reframing. In Erin's version of events, he was the reasonable one. The victim. She was the problem that needed solving. Don't, Mara said quietly. Don't what? Don't call me sweetheart. Don't use that voice. Don't pretend the past 2 years didn't happen. Her hand tightened on the gun. I know what you are now. The performance doesn't work anymore. Erin's smile faltered. Just for a moment. Then it was back wider, sharper. Performance. That's rich coming from someone who's been playing victim so convincingly. How long did you practice that act? The broken arm, the terrified girlfriend, the desperate text to a dead woman's phone? I didn't have to practice. You broke my arm. You made me terrified. Those were real, Erin. You fell. I tried to catch you and you pulled away. You've always been clumsy when you're upset. Erin spread his hands, reasonable, patient. And now you've gotten involved with a known criminal, a man whose wife died under suspicious circumstances, a man who's using you to get to me. Can't you see you're being manipulated? Mara felt the old doubt trying to surface. The voice that said maybe she'd misremembered. Maybe it wasn't as bad as she thought. Maybe she'd overreacted. Erin's voice had lived in her head for so long it had become indistinguishable from her own thoughts. But that voice was quieter now. Weaker. You killed my sister, Mara said. The courtroom went silent. Erin's expression didn't change. Lena left. Voluntarily. She was always unstable. You know that. She was investigating you. She had evidence. She was going to expose everything. Mara took a step forward. You made her disappear the same way you made Elena Russo disappear. Car accidents. Convenient timing. Clean murders disguised as bad luck. You don't know what you're talking about. I know exactly what I'm talking about. I spent 2 years watching you manipulate evidence and people. Watching you lie professionally and call it justice. You taught me to see patterns, Erin. You just never thought I'd use those skills on you. Something dark flickered across Erin's face. The mask slipping. You're hysterical. Trauma does that. Makes you see conspiracies where there's just coincidence. It's sad, really. I tried to help you. Tried to give you stability. And this is how you repay me. You broke my arm. You fell. You isolated me from everyone I knew. You were overwhelmed. I was protecting you. You monitored my phone, controlled my money, told me where I could go and who I could see. Because I loved you. Erin's voice rose. Because you needed someone to take care of you. You were falling apart, Mara. I held you together. You tore me apart. The words echoed in the empty courtroom. You systematically destroyed everything about me that wasn't useful to you. You convinced me I was worthless, stupid, lucky anyone would want me. You made me believe I deserved the violence. That I caused it. That if I was just better, smarter, quieter, smaller, you'd stop hurting me. I never hurt you. You broke my arm. You shoved me into walls. You grabbed my throat and squeezed until I saw stars. You raped me and called it making up. Mara's voice didn't shake. Each word was a nail driven into the coffin of who she used to be. You hurt me every single day for 2 years. And the worst part? The absolute worst part? You made me thank you for it. Erin stared at her. The mask was gone now. What remained was cold. Calculating. The man who'd helped bury evidence of Elena Russo's murder. Who'd made Lena disappear. Who'd built a career on corruption and called it public service. You're right. Aaron said quietly. I did all of that. And you know what? You let me. Every time you stayed, every time you apologized, every time you convinced yourself it would get better. You chose this. You're not a victim, Mara. You're complicit. The words landed like physical blows. Mara felt them hit. Felt the old shame rising. The belief that she'd failed herself. That staying meant she'd wanted it somehow. Then Dominic spoke for the first time. That's the lie abusers tell. His voice was rough but clear. That their victims chose the abuse. That staying was consent. That suffering was complicity. He moved to stand beside Mara, still pressing his wounded side but upright, present. My wife didn't choose to die. Lena didn't choose to disappear. Mara didn't choose any of this. You chose. Every act of violence, every manipulation, every lie. Those were your choices. Own them. Aaron laughed. The grieving widower. How touching. Tell me, Russo, did you own your choices when Elena died? When you let her investigate people who could kill her? When you failed to protect her? Dominic's expression didn't change. Every day. I own that failure every single day. The difference between us is I'm trying to prevent it from happening again. You're trying to repeat it. Movement in the shadows. Mara saw them before Aaron did. 3 men, armed, moving into position around the courtroom. The Volkovs. Aaron wasn't alone. Of course he wasn't. You brought backup, Mara said. Insurance. In case your attack dog decided to do something stupid. Aaron gestured to the armed men. This ends one way. You testify that Russo kidnapped you, forced you to lie about me, that everything you've said was coerced. I finish my cooperation with the feds. We all walk away. And if I refuse, then you die here. Along with Russo. Another tragic case of domestic violence turned murder-suicide. Aaron's smile was back. I've already written the narrative. All that's left is making it true. Sirens. Distant but approaching. Dominic had called someone. Police, maybe. Feds. Aaron heard them too. His confidence flickered. You can't prove anything, Aaron said. It's your word against mine. And I'm a prosecutor. You're a domestic abuse victim with a history of mental instability. Who do you think they'll believe? Everyone, Mara said. Because I recorded this entire conversation. She held up Dominic's phone. The voice recording app active. Timestamp running. Every word Aaron had said captured digitally. His admission of violence. His acknowledgement of the murders. All of it. Aaron's face went white. Then red. Then something worse. The controlled facade shattered completely. He lunged for her, moving faster than she expected. His hands reaching for her throat the way they had so many times before. Mara didn't freeze. Didn't flinch. She raised the gun and fired. The shot went wide, intentionally, hitting the wall behind Aaron. But it stopped him. Made him realize she wasn't the woman he'd broken anymore. The Volkov men moved, but Dominic was faster despite his wound. His own weapon out, creating a standoff. The sirens were louder now. Outside the courthouse. Car doors slamming. Voices shouting commands. Aaron looked at the doors. At Mara. At Dominic. Calculating odds. Then he ran, disappearing into the maze of empty courtrooms and corridors. The Volkov men hesitated, then followed, abandoning the confrontation for survival. Dominic lowered his weapon. We need to leave. Now. The recording. Upload it to my secure server. Then wipe the phone. Dominic was already moving toward the back exit. The police can't find us here. Not together. Not with my history. Mara did as he said, fingers flying over the phone screen. Upload. Wipe. Factory reset. By the time they reached the service exit, the phone was clean and the recording was safely stored in a server farm she'd never be able to locate. They emerged into an alley as police flooded the courthouse's front entrance. Dominic led her through a series of back streets, moving like he'd planned this route days ago. Maybe he had. Maybe he always had escape routes mapped in his head. They reached a different car, older, nondescript, keys under the mat. Dominic drove this time, his wounded side making him wince with every turn but his hands steady on the wheel. Mara sat beside him, her broken arm throbbing, her ears still ringing from the gunshot. "Did I kill him?" she asked quietly. "No. You missed by 2 feet." "Good." Mara looked at her hands. They weren't shaking. "I didn't want to kill him. I wanted him to see that I wasn't afraid anymore." Mission accomplished. They drove in silence for a while. Mara watched the city pass outside the window, thinking about Aaron running through a condemned courthouse, thinking about the recording now in federal hands through channels she didn't understand, thinking about what came next. "What happens now?" she asked. "Aaron will be found. Or he won't. Either way, the recording destroys his credibility. The feds will have to reevaluate his testimony. My lawyers will have ammunition. The Volkovs will realize he's more liability than asset." Dominic glanced at her. "You'll be safe. That was the deal. And you?" "I survive. I always do." But his voice was tired. The wound in his side was bleeding again, fresh blood seeping through the bandages Mara had applied. "There's an apartment. Safe house downtown. Doctor who owes me favors will meet us there. You can stay as long as you need. And then you choose. New identity, new life, far away from all of this. Or..." Dominic paused. "You stay. Help me finish what Elena and Lena started. Take down the corruption they died trying to expose." Mara looked at him. This man who'd broken down her door because a dead woman's phone had rung. Who'd carried her out of hell and given her weapons instead of protection. Who'd been shot defending her and still offered her freedom. "I'm staying," she said. "You understand what that means." "It means I stop being afraid. It means I use everything Aaron taught me about manipulation and evidence and lying, and I turn it against people who deserve it." Mara met Dominic's eyes. "It means I'm not owned. I'm aligned." Something that might have been a smile touched Dominic's mouth. "Elena would have liked you. I would have liked her too." They pulled into an underground garage. The doctor was waiting, an older man with steady hands and no questions. He looked at Dominic's wound at Mara's casted arm, and just gestured them inside. The apartment was small but secure. While the doctor worked on Dominic, Mara stood at the window watching the city lights. Somewhere out there Aaron was running. The Volkovs were regrouping. Federal agents were processing a recording that would change everything. And she was here. Not hiding. Not running. Not afraid. She thought about the text she'd sent 6 days ago. A wrong number. A dead woman's phone. A mistake that had destroyed her life and saved it simultaneously. Dominic appeared beside her, freshly bandaged, moving carefully but alive. "Regret it yet?" he asked. Mara thought about her broken arm. About the courthouse. About pulling a trigger for the first time in her life. About choosing war over peace. "The message was a mistake," she said quietly. "The war was not." Dominic nodded once. Looked out at the city with her. 2 people bound by violence and loss and the strange alchemy that turns victims into something harder. Something that survives. Outside, the city moved on. Inside, Mara stood beside a man who'd lost everything and found purpose in revenge. She wasn't his weapon. She wasn't his possession. She was something Aaron had never let her be. She was her own. And that was enough.